Everyone, it is my privilege to be sitting up in this magical space with these folks. I'm going to start down here. This is Zaire Baptiste, who is a technical director, the DJ, and the MC that we heard this afternoon. This mad woman here is the associate artistic director, Cassandra Joseph. And the action architect of it all, Elizabeth Streb. So this is a really exciting thing for me. My first summer at The Pillow was in 1997 when the company was last here, and I'm delighted to still be standing. And it's great to see some newer works and some older works. And I'm wondering about, I'm going to start, Cassandra, let you have a chance to catch your breath maybe for a second. I was thinking about one of the things we notice in seeing dances that get reconstructed in a variety of forms is that dancers' physical abilities keep increasing, like that somehow it's the same as we see in the Olympics, that we see people breaking records. And so I'm wondering, Elizabeth, if you could talk a little bit about revisiting some of these works that were just outside your capacity when you were investigating them in the late 70s and early 80s, and then what it's like to see the dancers now who have had the years of training with you and their own background experiences, and what it's like to see their physical abilities in the 21st century.
When I watch them, and the techniques have definitely metamorphosized way beyond what I was capable of doing with my training, which I didn't start dancing until I was 17 or so, and I did other things. Oh, you too? Okay, good. I feel better now. I'm not the only one. But I did downhill skiing and motorcycles, just my own version of what I think is cool in the world. Made my own movements up, and that's the way it was. And so I was ignorant about the fact that when I started, I majored in dance at SUNY Brockport. And there's some Brockport people out here. Lois, come on, yoo-hoo! I think that the best answer to your question is that I didn't feel embarrassed that I couldn't dance, and every other young lady in the program could dance, but I oddly enough was blessed with not noticing that I couldn't dance and they could. So I think that right now when I watch these dancers, and Cassandra leads the troupe, 14 years. Come on, a round of applause. And when Cassandra walked in to Slam, I bore her with this story. Our eyes met, and I knew that you knew things I didn't. And I think really the cusp of it is people come in and can do things I couldn't do at that time. So that's what I saw on stage.
So Cassandra, can you say something about what it was the process like for you and the company of getting these works back, and what was the process of rediscovering them?
Well, when I first came into the company, we were kind of transitioning to more machines, so we were in the air a lot, and I think we kind of looked for dancers who could accomplish that, had some sense of air awareness coming in. And it just kind of grew in that fashion. So to come back and do, just the foundation, the rudiments of pop action, and to understand where it came from and how it grew so much was, it was a privilege. It was a privilege. It gave us a lot of information, more so than just, we are, we're in the presence of, her words, and we do a lot of investigating. We have a lot of footage, and but it does not compare at all to, figuring out, the significance of an arm, or where you're looking, especially coming from crazy machines. It was a very surreal experience, but I think it really fed, the knowledge and certainly the joy in performing what we do now.
One of the things that was striking to think about is that the things that you were doing with your lower budget, a jump rope, a hula hoop, a 2x4, versus the machines now, but you sort of started a quest for investigation. And I see that, and so I saw it especially in Ad, which the piece where the male dancer was downstage here. And could you say something about realizing that maybe you've been asking the same questions in different ways since you first started to make work?
What? I only have two questions really in the end, right? Can humans fly? But really more importantly, can they land? And will they land? Because why would you just stay in the air? When you do it, you realize air dancing, let's say you're in the circus and they never ever land. I complained to them about it directly. You realize what a rich, amazing harvest it is in having the human body take a hit. And not just to make a metaphor about the physical destruction of movement, but to really destroy your body and be able to take the hit and keep on going. And I think the invention of action, when you see these dancers, Cassandra in the lead and all of the others on the trampoline, I certainly wasn't doing that. So what can you do in this amount? They invent the vocabulary inserted into the questions in the machine and the technique that I'm asking them to do.
So at what point, and this brings in the role of Zaire in the performance, that you like the sound of the impact, and so then your responsibility and is maybe even giving that to us even more. Can you tell me what you're listening for and looking for, and what you're choosing to feed to us in the audience in the sound score?
Well, it's the interesting part about it is that we're always looking to find the thing that you don't expect. So in this kind of movement, you wouldn't expect to hear all the voices as loud as they are. You wouldn't expect to hear the calls. Those are things that are usually masked in dance and performance. So we like to present those to the audience as a part of the performance, and all the hits that you hear, and then the stuff that I play over there, the sound effects, it's all to increase the action. And so when we go into it, we just look at what we're doing and how we can enhance that. Even the mics that you see down on the floor, they pick up everything. So our thing is never, and it's been Elizabeth's mantra, is never to hide anything. So we don't hide the impact. We don't hide what we're doing. You see us on the sides. You see us putting away things. That's all a part of this show. It's all a part of the lineage. It's all a part of the action. So I feel when we come in, that's what we look for. Everything that we're doing.
So, Cassandra, could you say something about when you're bringing new dancers into the company who are much more used to concealing the kind of we're dancing together now, and what it's like to try to get people to vocalize like I'm going, and what that's like to get people, and what it's and how it maybe invigorates your dancing?
Yeah, it's a muscle we have to build. I think coming into the work, it's so unique that everyone coming in, it takes a while to kind of acclimate just the body. You have to know where you're going. Everything is happening at once. And then on top of that, you have to call something. You have to find like the gut strength to also vocalize. So it is definitely a muscle that we build. I think that a lot of the cues come from social references or, private jokes sometimes, and makes it a little funny or interesting. And I think that seeps in and takes your mind off the task of having to call. So it becomes a joyous experience if you're into that. I know some dancers are a little more reserved, but the work has a lot of room, the personal best. And so people start to bring out that animal just because it arises naturally. And so you have people who call, in a much more joyous manner, and some people who are just, more grit. So it's a process of, allowing someone to find their own voice in the midst of being terrified or, being exhausted or, just really trying to survive out there. So it's a beautiful thing to watch a dancer find their voice and let it, and kind of show their personality that way.
So Elizabeth, the thing I was thinking about is that I'm used to in your shows that being the only kind of words we hear is that the ones that are cueing action or responding to the situation, and that feels like totally in present and paying attention. But you made a choice in the construction of this show to give us also a little sense of some things you were thinking about, and maybe what some critics were celebrating or criticizing. So could you say something about what it was like to bring words in that have a kind of reflective quality compared to the kind of instant, in the moment text that the dancers are providing?
Ooh, well, it was an idea about looking back, and I went back to what was I thinking when I made the pole vault, or did it have to do with the economy, or did it have to do with, well, nothing else was going on. I knew I was going to go to my restaurant cooking job at 6 o'clock, so I thought, I guess I'll go to the lumberyard. What else am I going to do? And so those stories, I think, help to understand, rather than the abstract thing. We decided to say, I'm going to have a prequel set of words, like for 30 seconds, and to say, this is what I was thinking of. And oddly, I remember it very clearly, where I was, how nothing early was working out so good. You could say in your head, oh, this really isn't working out. I remember walking to the restaurant to cook, and I'm thinking, I was 35, and not that much had happened by 35, but I thought, well, this might not work out. What am I doing? And then I realized that I would just, tell the story for this show of those times. I mean, did it sound like I was belly aching? I'll ask the audience, would you like there to be fewer words before each piece? It didn't bother you? Okay. What about reading the bad reviews afterwards? It was hard to find a good review, I will say, so but I thought it was time to name names. Don't you think? Like, name names, man. That's what they said. But I wasn't being mean. I was just thinking, wow, they actually said that about that piece, and then how could... But a lot of what made the work, and these guys aren't just dancers, as you could see. They are inventing the possibility of pushing the timing. Like, nobody wants to go when the perfect second is the right moment to go. You say, oh, give me a few more seconds, right? But you can't. And so the pieces, like Little Ease and Add, are the exact same as they were decades ago. It's just shorter, faster, higher, harder.
So the other thing that I think is so striking, and I know for me watching your work, always I find a sense of delight in the physical exertion of the performance and the delight that I see you having to dig in. And it is quite physically rewarding for me sitting there doing almost nothing. But I was also thinking about the sense of humor that you bring to the surface in Buster or Stick, that there are, and Cassandra, you have it in some moments of coming off the trampoline, that you are definitely aware that there are people watching you and that physical comedy is real. Could you say about when you decided to allow, first you, Elizabeth, to allow that to realize like that sense of physical comedy is present, and to allow the dancers to explore that in their own relationship to the situations you put them in?
Well, the short answer is that they just did that. And I didn't say anything about it because it seemed like the right thing to do. They were feeling that intense feeling, and things came out of their mouth. And Zaire, the way he conducts the show is, and starts it by you guys, giving you permission, take your phone out if you want, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, why not? So I feel like they know more about what's happening up there than I certainly do at this point. But I think I always 14 years ago, come on, Cassandra, 14 years, what do you think? Modern dance, come on. And Zaire, is it 14 for you? 15 for Zaire. And it didn't have anything to do with letting them do what they want. But I think that they know more than I do because it's happening to them.
So, Cassandra, could you say something about that? Like when you realize, like, this is the moment where it feels like I can be a little flirtatious, or I can be a little assertive in my expertise.
Well, I think that just in talking to Streb alum, that there was kind of a distinct moment when that shifted. I think the associate artistic director before me, Fabio, was a circus clown for a little bit of his training, and he was, he brought a lot of levity to the work, and then we found very quickly that because the work can be really intense, that having that in the room, allowed people more space, to kind of explore and to, invent, and so I think that Fabio left the company about 4 years ago or so, so it just kind of grew from, his turning it. And then we fed off each other. We're a team. So oftentimes, what everyone does around you, you kind of want to one up them, or, it's a friendly competition, and, it just kind of blossomed. And Elizabeth has a rule that's do what you want when you can, so every moment on the stage presented, a space for us to create something, to either make the work more accessible to the audience, or to get through as a team, or to, have that, comedic element there, and so I think we build off each other in that way.
Zaire, can you say how you're adding to the community feeling on stage? I mean, there's certainly the experience we're getting that you're amplifying sounds for us, but I feel like it's also essential how you're supporting the work they're doing, because an hour-long endurance and crazy thing that we just witnessed is it's not just a 3-minute dance that we might think of it, because even on your breaks you're carrying equipment and whatever.
Yeah, it never stops. I think from the moment that I step on the stage, it's to set the tone for the entire show. So that's why we come out, we quickly connect with the audience. We tell them, which is something that we do at our home space slam, like we allow you to come in. We used to call it an autonomous room. It was like, you do as you wanted to do, take out your phones. Elizabeth used to say, if your phone rings during the show and you want to answer it, because we're not holding your attention enough that you would, not answer it. So we've always it's always been about that, and it's always been about, letting people know that you are a part of the show as well, because when you guys make noise, when you guys have those phones out, we get amplified off of that, and we make the show keep going. So it is a give and take between us and the audience, and so that's where it starts. And then from there, that energy just continues throughout the rest of the room and throughout the show. And you see, we've been in places where the room isn't energetic, and then we flow with you guys. So when we're always looking for that energy that's in the room, and we take that and we put that on stage with us as well. And so we build a big community amongst each other, and all of us, the entire company, we're always looking at each other, we're always giving each other signs, we're always hyping each other up, and that is a part of just completely outside of what we're doing. Just our mindset and where we're at with each other is very communal. So that's what we try to build every time we go out.
So Elizabeth, I was thinking about the backdrop that you put some of those sweet little solos in here. This is a big space. What did it look like to see from sitting out there, to see some of those early works in the vast expanse of the Berkshires?
I don't really care for foliage. It's so decorative, and so I feel that in a way I'm going to have to do something really special on stage to get you to not look at the trees. So I find it annoying. I guess that's the honest truth.
And Cassandra, anything to say about what it was like to do this work outside? I mean, your space is such a special space for being in, and it's your home space. And obviously you go to other places, but now you're sort of stripped down and outside. Got something to say about that?
Oh, it's just beautiful. We at Slam, I think that, we have about 30 foot ceilings. So, I think the work is limited by our ceilings. So this is the closest thing to really flying, when you're on the trampoline and you just see nothing but sky, and that expanse is just truly, it's kind of where we should be. We can skip the trees, but definitely the sky and the clouds, and luckily we had the weather to hold out for us today, so it was really a dream.
We have time for one or two questions, and I'm going to repeat them so everybody can hear, but you got to talk loud. Okay, this is a question that I think you may have answered before. How do you not get hurt when you land? What kind of padding is built into that costume?
Muscle. It's much like any discipline out there. It involves rigorous protocols and training, and we have mats, and we have years and years of experience from all the alum before us. Because we are definitely charting new territory. So information, certainly a lot of training, some time, so when we incorporate somebody into the company, we don't, kind of like push them off the ledge, but we start with class and then just the basics of how to transfer, the impact on different surfaces of your body. And then depending on how they acclimate, we go higher and higher and higher. We say at Streb, we don't say no. We have a rule that we can't say no, but we do inch up. When we feel we're confronted with this potential no, we take a step back and then we work through those challenges.
I mean, I think, Elizabeth, you have said in the past that people don't come in knowing how to do this, and that they can't, that you're not looking for somebody who already knows how to land, and that the training has to come in the doing of it. Right. So that what kind of mindset, more than a physical ability, are you looking for then?
Just, I guess, the first, the second, the last word would be curiosity. Like, I don't necessarily love the most trained dancers that come in, although all these dancers on stage are trained to within an inch of their lives. But, it might be gymnastics or something. But I really want to see the wild animal. I want them to scare me, basically, in auditions. Like, I don't want them to care about what I think of them or Cassandra or Zaire or anyone else. I want them to, when I see that, I've been known to hire completely untrained people. And then a little while later, you go, listen, they're not trained. Oh, I didn't notice that.
Time for one. Yes, right here. So this is an observation that while we might think of you as superheroes, you're action heroes, and that using each other's real names feels like a really a good reminder that you are real people. Want to say anything about that, Elizabeth?
I think Cassandra's better to answer that, because I call them by name in rehearsal, but you call them by name in the performances, right?
Yes. We like Zaire mentioned, we don't camouflage anything. What you see is exactly who we are, and it fits that we call each other by name, sometimes by nickname, or it's really a journey to get to the stage, from when you first walk into the building or you first get hired as a company member. It is a journey, and we cry together, laugh together, sweat together. So it's so genuine, it's so genuine, and I can't imagine it being any other way.
Well, we are glad you are here as action heroes, as superheroes, as real folk, and come back again later this week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nancy's on! Hey!
On! Hey! Daniel, on! Hey!
Everyone's on!
Poseidon, up! Ready, go! Hold on tight! Ready. Forward, up!